Welcome, everyone, to joining our webinar today on preventing a nuclear Iran, security analysis and regional implications. I'm Ari Finkelstein, Director of Campus Affairs at JCRC New York, and we are so fortunate to have retired Colonel Miri Eisin, who many of you will recognize from previous JCRC New York webinars about Israel. So I'll introduce her anyway, since many of you know her, some of you may not. Miri is a senior fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University in Herzliya, Israel. She has a deep background in the intelligence, security, and diplomacy worlds and is a frequent commentator on these issues in world media. During her 20 years in the Israeli Defense Forces, she served in a variety of positions in the Israeli military intelligence, and in all her positions, she was the first woman to serve in such a capacity. After retiring from the military, she served as the Israeli government spokesperson during the Second Lebanon War in 2006, which I remember, and as the PM's international press secretary. Miri is a founding member of the Deborah Forum, Women in National Security, Cyberwell to combat online anti-Semitism, ALMA, a research center in the Galilee, and is the chair of the board of the Taub Center for Social Policy Studies in Israel. Please, welcome to all of you. We're so glad you could join us today. Please put your questions in the Q&A function, and we'll try and get to as many as possible. Clean header, no promises, but we're going to try to make as many as possible. I want to acknowledge that when we planned this webinar just a couple of days ago, the US Iran Memorandum of Understanding was central in our thoughts. It still is, but maybe not quite as central. We just, in New York, underwent some primaries yesterday, and the elections didn't always go the way we wanted. People who campaign on anti-Israel, on their anti-Israel bona fides, unfortunately won in many cases. So it's a heavy moment, I think, for all of us, both here and in Israel. So, Miri, let me start and ask you, start off with the Memorandum of Understanding. So we all know the United States and Iran signed one last week. Can you just share with us a little bit what's in the document and what's been left out?
It's a one-pager. So first of all, it's not a long document. When we talk about an MOU, it's a memorandum, and basically what it says, these are the issues that we want to address within the next 60 days. So number one, as it said, from the minute that it was signed, we're opening up the Straits of Hormuz. And when I say opening up, this was signed between the US and Iran, so it's both of them are allowing it. We're very aware of the fact that Iran has been obstructing, but so has the United States, not been allowing Iran to export. So both sides have kind of stood back. It's a very physical aspect, and that immediately opened up. So that's an element, but that was not the first point inside the MOU. The MOU, the first point said that there will be a cessation of all hostilities everywhere, and then it states specifically, including Lebanon. And this was signed a few days ago. And I can tell you that both today and yesterday, the Israeli Defense Forces, in both protecting the north and in going against Hezbollah down south, have again attacked and killed Hezbollah operatives, meaning this was written into the MOU, and I'm already saying what's in it and what's not in it. Israel is not mentioned in it. Hezbollah is not mentioned in it, but Lebanon is mentioned in it. In addition to that, it says, when we have agreed on this and we've opened up the Straits of Hormuz, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to sit down 60 days and hash out everything. I hope all of you understand the sarcasm dripping from my voice. I say that with a lot of sarcasm, but at the end, you do have to hash something out. And it's adding in an additional 60 days. The difference between before the MOU and after the MOU is that the Hormuz Straits have opened. And that immediately took into effect, and immediately ships started going through. And you're immediately seeing that in oil prices. I don't yet think you'll see that in gasoline prices, but that's an impact that's going to take a little bit of time. And then further in that, it states that once in these 60 days, they discuss all of the different issues. It doesn't mention the nuclear. It doesn't mention the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. It doesn't mention any of the Iranian capabilities. It's very general. That doesn't bother me. Okay, those are the things you hash out inside the room. You only put on the MOU the things you agree on. And so that's what's in it, meaning it mentions Lebanon, it mentions Hormuz, it mentions the cessation of hostilities. And then it says in a very specific way that the United States will help to open up opportunities, and it talks there in money terms for both investment and reconstruction inside the Islamic Republic of Iran. So that's like what's written on that one pager. What's not written there? I said nuclear, let alone Israel and Hezbollah, proxies in general. So when the Houthis fire, is that part of it or not? And those are not mentioned in the MOU.
So just to follow up a little bit on just the last point, what you've mainly been talking about. I mean, in your experience, have you ever seen an agreement like this where parties are not mentioned in the MOU but are held to obligations? What impact does that have on the likely success of the agreement? I mean, in your opinion, also given where Israel is with dealing with Hezbollah and protecting the north.
So, Ari, let's take it apart. I'm going to take it even a step back from that.
Good.
Have you ever heard of an MOU when it comes to this kind of an agreement? Usually what you do in these situations is
No.
you negotiate, ceasefires, and you arrive at the different type of disengagement, ceasefires, armistice. Those are the terms that we usually talk about after you have the military clash. But what's happening here is that it's not about the military clash. The big issue that happened, well, it is part of the military in that sense. The big issue that's been impacting the world is the Hormuz Straits. And I think that because of that, to be able to open up the Hormuz Straits, that's why I know I haven't seen an MOU like this before, but I've also not seen a sovereign state in its own way taking an international shipway. I'm not talking about the Houthis, they're a non-state actor, but a sovereign state taking an international shipping lane and just closing it off. And the economic ramifications of what that happens. So here I think it had to do with that. They wanted to do the one, and to do so they put that in. The second portion that you asked about, which is one of the things that we ask also inside Israel, is, so what are we in this? So the MOU, it has a lot of advantages for the Islamic regime of Iran, and I absolutely see why the United States also, again, the Hormuz Straits are open. That's important for the entire world. When you look at it, you go, so wait, it doesn't mention Israel. So do we have to do anything? And here it already gets into international relations and to the fact that Israel and the United States, not President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, Israel and the United States are close allies. Israel and the United States, not President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, jointly went to a joint attack, Epic Fury in the American name, and Raising Lion, whatever it's, I always make the mistake on the name, something with a lion on the Israeli side, and fought together. And it was very clear that at the stage that you get to the negotiation, Israel is not at the table. But that's something that the United States takes the front place. So I'm not worried about the fact that we're not mentioned. In its own way, that's a caveat for us. We're not mentioned. It says Lebanon. It doesn't say Israel. On the other hand, it doesn't mention any of the challenges that we have in addition to the nuclear aspect with the Islamic regime of Iran.
So, I mean, this is not directly on the MOU. How is it that neither Netanyahu's government or Trump's government, although I can sort of guess on that stage, didn't game out the fact that the Iranians would take the Strait of Hormuz basically and control it? I mean, Netanyahu's been planning for this for years, right? So how did that happen? How do you explain that?
How did October 7th happen? How did the Yom Kippur failure happen? I mean, and this is one of those things that we're going to look afterwards, and I'm going to say, really? You didn't have a question like that? You didn't think that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, that is very open and shows a lot of photographs of their quick little boats that they're out there, and they're out there for the mining. So on the one hand, it's a question of assessing the threat. I also think that when you assess a threat and you look at it, I think that everybody, certainly inside Israel, it's harder for me to say inside the United States, thought that the impact of the killing of both Khamenei, the top Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, because that was a lot of that was done by Israel and that was by Israeli intelligence, that would have more of an impact. And here we saw the strength, if I can I'm going to call it that, of the decentralized Iranian structure, which was done inside their military, and that's where they went out to Hormuz. And so, as I'm going to say, we're all looking at it and going, really? And I'm going to say, really? And somebody has to go check that. But that's going to be in the you know, I'm losing my English for a moment. The commissions that inside Israel, we haven't had a commission for October 7th yet. It's going to look at it after the fact. I don't think anybody can answer that right now. I don't know what intelligence was on the table. I do know that we thought that our impact of what Israel did together with the United States would take them out in a different way than the way that they actually acted.
Very interesting. Um, so I would say, and a lot of people I'm reading say that the MOU appears to strengthen Iran. I recently actually read an article that said that the failure of the US in the war will lead the Gulf states to reassess their strategic policies and come to new agreements with Iran because it's had a major effect on their economy. Can you both describe your assessment of Israel's strategic situation now after the signing of the MOU, and also talk about what you think is the impact of the United States and Israeli failure in the war, called that, what that means in the broader Middle East, and also in terms of Israel's place in the Middle East vis-a-vis these other nations, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar.
So, Ari, I'm going to push back a bit at the question
Sure.
because you made the assumption of failure.
Uh-huh.
And it's June, like I'm still in June, okay? And when I say failure in that sense, there's a lot we don't know. And the fact that the Islamic regime of Iran has always wanted to be at the negotiating table, it's willing to be at the negotiating table forever. It uses every single tactic at the negotiation table in a very professional way. It was one of the aspects where Israel was very critical of the United States a decade ago. And I don't want to go down that road that immediately everybody gets very tense about, okay? But in the negotiations last time that brought about a nuclear agreement in that sense at the time, the JCPOA, that the Iranians are always willing to be at the table. That doesn't always mean failure. Okay, it means that they like to be at the table. That's a good aspect for them. But they have not in any way yet exposed what they took as a hit. What we saw is that they continued to be able to function. And that's fine. Functionality is fine. They did not dissipate, and we did not see a change of regime. That's not the same as saying success. That's not the same in that sense as I saying. So I'm pushing back on that one there because I don't know what happened, and I may yet say that this is a colossal failure. But I do know that the amount of military sorties and the military impact of what was done against the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and all of its different capabilities was very intense. And they haven't fixed it in the last 3 months. They've been under siege. The ports are not open. And if they take all of the money that they don't have now, because they don't have money, and they invest it only in that, they're going to have a problem inside the Islamic regime of Iran because their economy is going to collapse. Not that it's in good shape anyways. And I say that because when I look right now into that future, into my non-crystal ball, I think that we're in a very challenging place from the MOU that has to do with what Iran gained. In what
Right.
way? The first impact for me is the fact that inside the agreement that was agreed right now, Iran managed to put in Lebanon. Iran, the Islamic regime, I should say, of Iran, is not the protector of Lebanon. Not only that, but Lebanon doesn't want Iran in any way to be involved. The Islamic regime of Iran is not just the one that supplied Hezbollah, but after the Second Lebanon War, the Islamic regime of Iran is the one that rebuilt Hezbollah in southern Lebanon for the Shiites, gave Hezbollah enormous power. And by letting this be connected, to me, that's the biggest challenge that I have. And I'm even going to use the word failure. That's the one that I look at as an Israeli and go, really? That's the thing that you allowed into there, without mentioning Hezbollah in any way whatsoever. And so when I look at Israel's strategic situation, I would say that at the beginning of March, just a few months ago, Israel, together with our Abraham Accord fellow countries, and none of them have stopped being Abraham Accord fellow countries. We live in the Middle East. We're part of this Middle East. And UAE and Bahrain were attacked just like Israel was attacked, in some cases more. And I think that part of what's going to happen is that that very open relationship, which is still open, United won't fly to Israel, Delta won't fly to Israel. Emirates have no problem whatsoever. They are the ones who fly in and out of Israel 4 times a day. Okay, I'm saying we're in the Middle East. And so we have both the direct connections, we have the economic connections. And I think what came out very quietly, very subtly, is that there are very strong security connections as well. Having said all of that, UAE and Bahrain, as the Abraham Accord countries, are, 30 miles from Iran. I'm 750 miles from Iran. So it's continuing to be an alliance that continues to be there. But the shift that's happened in the Middle East, not just in the last 3 months in this event, but overall over these last, oh my God, 2 years and 9 months, it's like unbelievable what we've lived in for so long. The shift that's happened here that's impacting us all over is now kind of coming to the table. And Iran is coming out stronger than certainly I would have wanted. I can't say that I would have expected. And I'm still waiting to see what the domestic impact is because they are in a very challenging place, but they're not showing it. So we don't know. So I know I went all over the place in that answer, but if I want to say a bottom line on that, is that first of all, can we not yet call it success or failure for all those who are calling it success and for all those who are calling it failure? And number two is that it hasn't broken, if I can say that, any of the existing alliances that Israel has, and that's saying a lot. Just in the last few days, Morocco sent to Israel for the international stabilizing force that's supposed to go into the Gaza Strip. But we have a very strong relationship, security relationship, still with Morocco. And we have a direct relationship, much more open, because with all three, it was done at the time. And so that has sustained it. Same in that matter goes for Egypt or Jordan. Everybody looks around and looks at the bad sides. I'm like, it is quite amazing that in all of this war as it went on, all of these countries are continuing, and I always differentiate between the talking, is what I'm doing with my hands, and between what happens inside the closed rooms. Okay? Because at the end, we have our borders with Egypt, with Jordan, the direct flights. We have a lot of cooperation, and in a silly way, okay? Tomorrow morning, Iran, almost 90 million strong, is still across the Arab Persian Gulf from UAE and Bahrain and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Oman and Qatar for that matter. Okay, they're right there. So you have to find some kind of way to live. And so again, I don't think of it as a failure. I don't think of it as a success. I may wish it could have been different. Okay, but that's not the same thing. And I apologize for the very long answer.
So let me post this back, push it back a little bit. The United States, right? How do these countries, these Gulf states, assess the support that they've gotten from the United States, or the reliability, I guess, of the United States after this MOU, right?
Well, the Secretary of State,
And
as
what
we speak
and
right
what
now, is in the area.
okay, and what impact, right? If they don't see the United States as quite as a reliable partner, right, in protecting them in the same way, what impact does that have if you on these countries' relationships with Israel? Does it, or does not, or do you think those agreements stand on their own and they stand the test? They've already stood, the test of time through the very difficult years. Um, would those be impacted by a change in attitude towards the United States?
Ari, I'm thinking in that sense as you're asking that, and I'm thinking of our audience right now, and they're listening to you and me, and I'm going, so just like before I said, not President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, Israel and the United States, but of course we all understand that there's also the additional aspect of whoever the leader is.
Yeah.
And it is President Trump, and it is Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I'm just saying that because we're in an election year and we have no idea where we're going with our election year. You're not, I mean, you're not in a presidential election year in that sense. So, I mean, the other aspects, which are very important for the United States, everybody looks as President Trump as being there for a few more years as president, right? And I say that right now because do you know what President Trump is going to do tomorrow? Because I don't.
I don't know what he's going to do.
And I follow him every single day, all of the time, because he makes so many statements that are about my arena. When I say my arena, I learn what's happening in our arena through social, Truth Social of the President of the United States, who tells me, and then sometimes 18 or 24 or even 36 hours later, sometimes, but not always, the Prime Minister puts something out. And I'm saying that because that impacts both the Abraham Accord countries and us. Okay, that isn't
Mhm.
just about Israel. I think that what the Abraham Accords did in a very beautiful way, because it's not just about sustainability, is that we're in this arena. We're toxic, but we're in this arena. And the subject that nobody wants to talk about, and we don't talk about it in the MOU, and nobody wants to put it out there, but that toxic subject that makes it so difficult for everybody isn't Gaza per se. And it isn't about the war and the killing and everything Gaza per se. It's about that issue called the Palestinians then and looking in and around, like Saudi Arabia, that right now has put the Palestinian issue much more central than it did before 2023. And so I say if there are changes that have come around, and that goes also for the United States. President Trump put on the table in the former candidacy and also now, he has his peace plan, including the Gaza peace plan, and you have the Board of Peace. You have things that are out there, and they're not talked about, but there's things going on as we speak. Okay, so it is these different types of motions. And here I'm going to say there's President Trump on the one hand, and the other hand is the other very large elephant in the room that we all don't like to address is the Israeli, not just prime minister, the Israeli government. Should I put on the table right now for our people, or do you all know? You can hear the sarcasm in my voice right now, okay? All the statements made by the Israeli Minister of Finance or the Israeli Minister of National Security, because I could put the list there, and so when I look at the gains or the weaknesses, at the challenges themselves, Europe won't allow into Europe two ministers from the Israeli government because of statements that they've made. So I think that what's amazing about the Abraham Accords is that they have sustained. I don't think that UAE or Bahrain, or for that matter, Saudi Arabia, that are not part of the Accords, are suddenly going to go somewhere else. Where are they going to go? They're not out there for Russia. They're certainly not out there for China. So in its own way, it kind of becomes like in the Cold War once upon a time where they're neither here nor there. But at the end, the United States of America has the hardware. And I live in an arena that having the hardware is important. Showing that you have the hardware is important. And I go back to what we were talking about before, is that we don't know about all of the hardware of Iran that was totally damaged and destroyed. They talk, okay? And maybe we didn't do anything, but I actually think that we did a lot and that we just don't know. When I say we, it's the United States and Israel together. So I think it's sustainable, and I don't think that they're suddenly going to turn around. And just like for Israel, I have to say that inside Israel, if you read what's going on here, and everybody's saying, who is this President Trump? One day he wakes up and there he is not supporting us anymore. And when I say supporting us, at the end, the United States and Israel are allies, and neither one of us are perfect. And right now, there are governments that, if we're talking to a nice New York audience, some of them support these governments and some of them don't support these governments on either side of the ocean. And that's the diversity of attention. And here we are in an election year. How's that for going all around everywhere and trying to come back to the point?
I think that's a really, really helpful explanation or insight into this situation, not one that I had before. Let me ask you another question. So, the Benjamin Netanyahu-led government joined the U.S. as full partners in this war against Iran. Yet Trump's interest in ending the war and Israel's continued presence in Lebanon appear to be driving the two countries apart with different interests. Trump has posted unflattering characterizations of Netanyahu, and Vance has warned the Israeli government or various elements of the Israeli government from considering and contesting the MOU. So, in your opinion, how far will this American need to end the war and Israel's very different interests and priorities lead to a fracture between the two countries, or disagreement, or whatever, maybe you can characterize it. I'm not sure how to characterize it.
Me who likes to characterize things, right? So first of all, it's not easy. It's not easy in Israeli. And I'm saying this as me. I don't know how often also you are. I do a lot of interviews in international media. And
Mhm.
so I hear the questions that I'm asked, okay? And it's like, what are you going to say to the American people that you guys are attacking in Lebanon, which is the way it's being framed to me, and our oil gas prices are going up. And I kind of want to, shake the person in front of me, something I'll never do on TV, and say, so you're paying more for your oil prices. And in Israel, people are being, they can't live inside their houses because they're being targeted by Hezbollah. Exactly the same. Okay. I mean, it's not the same thing. I compare it in that sense. We're not, I'm going to say something I really believe in. We are not the 51st state. We're a sovereign state.
Of Canada, where I'm
Okay.
from. Sorry.
Okay. So I know they get, but we are, it's not just a question of being a sovereign state. We are here. We were established in 1948. We've built this country in a variety of ways. As I said, lots of warts and pimples and lots of absolutely amazing accomplishments. And I think that right now, the US-Israel relationship, like throughout all of the years, I mean, I remember years when Reagan sanctioned us. I mean, it's things that happen, okay? We don't always get along on everything. And when I say that, I don't think that it's as big as a gap as being shown. To me, it's really looking at the difference between Hormuz Straits, which impact the entire world,
Mhm.
and the United States of America especially. But I'm not sure how much the United States people who are watching us right now know how much, for example, the Hormuz Straits impacted Asia. So when we're looking at opening the Hormuz Straits, this is something where it impacts the world, and Israel is part of the world, and we need to be there. And part of that is to arrive at a resolution in Lebanon and look at the second step that today, as we are speaking right now, there was a meeting going on between Israelis, Lebanese, under the auspices of the United States in DC while we're speaking. And when I say not you and me, I'm talking about officials. I'm talking about Israeli military officials. There were Lebanese military officials in the room, and they didn't want their photograph to come out, but they were in the room negotiating. So life is more complex than either or, meaning we understand that in Lebanon, everybody wants to not just sideline Hezbollah, but to make sure that they are not this defining terror army that decide what happens in Lebanon. Israel borders Lebanon. Hezbollah is part of Lebanon. So Lebanon has to build its own character and what they do with that. I call it the fist together with the what is it, the dove. Okay, you're doing
Mhm.
both. And Israel right now will not stop when it comes to Hezbollah, not offensively, meaning we're not going out against them, but they're trying to come back against us. We're going to be there. They're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to rebuild themselves. And hand in hand, we are sitting at the table with the United States and Lebanon, trying to arrive at some kind of an idea that would empower the Lebanese army. This is not an easy issue, but it's one that the Lebanese want. I said at the beginning when we were talking before that Lebanon was the one that for the last 3 months, even longer than that, has been not allowing the Iranians to have an embassy inside Lebanon, for the Iranians to have an embassy because of their support for Hezbollah. And every single time I listen to these Iranian, the Speaker of the House, these different ones of the parliament, as they all talk about their relationship with Lebanon, I'm thinking, listen to that so that I can give you the sync and the soundbite of the president of Lebanon saying, we're kicking the Iranians out, of the prime minister of Lebanon saying, we're kicking the Iranians out. So it's not just one voice. And that's true also when it comes to the Israeli US relationship. And one point that I'd like to emphasize for our audience is that in the military realm that I come from, we're not the 51st state, we're all one. Okay. There's a very strong relationship, and it doesn't have to do with CENTCOM specifically, meaning the Israeli US military security relationship has been a strong, intimate one where we view the threats in a very similar way. And I say that because I'm not sure everybody still sees the Islamic regime of Iran as a threat. And I kind of want to say they really are a threat. And Hezbollah really is a threat. And Hamas really is a threat. And take note, I didn't say Palestine, Palestinians, and I didn't say Lebanese, and I didn't say Iranians. And those distinctions are ones that we really need to make when we're talking about our overall relationships.
Hmm. What do you think? I mean, we're talking about politics, and Do you think the Israeli government appreciates sort of the shift in American attitudes and certainly the political parties to a degree, right? Whether it's the party themselves or people who are within the parties, they're sort of less than friendly stance towards Israel. Is that, I mean, I hear Netanyahu saying, well, we don't need to take money anymore from you. I want to change that relationship. I want to build our arms, our arms industry in so that we're not reliant on what is, I remember the 1990s, even the 80s, right? Um, Israelis were very concerned about, right, American disapproval from the government, whatever. What is your sense of that? How much is that filtered down to the Israeli public? Do they understand what's going on here? Are they concerned? What are they doing about it? That kind of thing.
So I'll start, and I'm going to say that as an Israeli, and for those who don't know me, I've lived here for 55 years. I may have a lovely American accent, but my parents moved here when I was a kid. I've been here from 1971. I'm very Israeli with a wonderful American accent in my English. And as a Jew and as an Israeli, I feel a zillion times safer in Israel than I do as a Jew, let alone an Israeli, anywhere in the world, let alone in New York. And I say that with a very heavy heart, a very heavy heart. I think that Israelis who are in contact with the world, absolute, because it's not just the United States, absolutely see the change and the horrific change. You're talking about the United States and United States politics. You could look across the world and look at what's happening in Australia. Then again, you could just talk about what's happening inside the United Kingdom, where the NHA, the National Health Service, wants to basically kick out Jewish doctors. I mean, we're at places that are unheard of, that are unheard of. In Israel, I think that the bulk of Israelis who are not as conversant and they're not deep inside understanding, what a big change happened in the United States. Okay, because it wasn't like that in the States before October 7th. Okay, nothing's perfect anywhere, but it wasn't like the way it is now. And I think that the tendency in Israel is pretty much to say, Tov, everybody's an anti-Semite. So, it's like we need and a nili mili. It's like I'm going to stand on my own. And you know what? In its own way, the state of Israel that was established despite the Holocaust, despite the Shoah, not because of the Shoah. And that's a big, big difference. Big difference. And we're here. And as I said, I feel safer here. The changes themselves, these are long-term issues that for the first time, at least I'm hearing from the Israeli government, and I'm seeing, even budgetary-wise, because that always shows where money goes also, is that they're really putting in much more. I personally don't think that what they're doing, I think that they're preaching to the choir and that they're pretty much doing the dichotomy, which to me is very bad. Okay, it's like you're either with us or you're against us. And I'm like, actually, no. How about both sides are right and both sides are wrong? But that's Miri. Okay, I have a very different approach to that. And it's very challenging. But in today's day and age, I think that what October 7th and what Hamas managed to do more than anybody else is not just to delegitimize Israel, but to legitimize themselves. That's huge for a terror organization to have legitimized themselves. I don't think Hezbollah has gotten to that level of legitimacy, but Hamas has. Meaning you say Hamas, it's Palestinian and it's legitimate. And you have to separate them. You can't talk about, yes, Hamas are Palestinian, but not all Palestinians are Hamas. And I think that when I look at US politics, these distinctions of looking at the difference between every right that Palestinians aspire to and should be able to get to does not mean that you can have an organization that calls for my annihilation and that's legitimate. Very challenging. Misinformation, disinformation, the real challenges in social media today. So yes, I think that there's awareness. I think that the Israeli approach doesn't necessarily manage it very well. But I think that there are a lot of people inside Israel that are much more on hand nowadays looking at this reputational branding challenge because it's not just about the brand and the reputation. Okay, at the end, we're not going to be able to go anywhere because we're the most vilified people on earth right now. Us and APAC. Hi, sorry. I'm like, that was me being cynical for those who don't know me. Okay. Because it's just, so much of it comes out in anti-Semitic tropes and memes that it's very easy to just say at the end, that it's anti-Semitism anyways. So it's very challenging right now to look at it and to understand the depth of that. Because once upon a time, and I still think of that, like there's the new Zion, the United States, and we're a very unique type country that was built in a very unique way. I agree. But the level of understanding of what that means makes it really challenging because you can't give a history lesson to everybody.
Well, let me just sort of push back a little bit, not push back, but just to add to what we were talking about. I think for a lot of people here, they look, well, there's Israel, but they look at the government, Netanyahu government, and they say, even among Jews, and they say, look, this is happening because of your policies, right? Um, October 7th obviously shouldn't have never have happened, but also in terms of how they handled the war. And in the past, I would say that you know leaders or governments that have lost the support of the United States in one way or another, usually it's the government, but people pay a price and have paid a price in Israeli elections. Do you see that happening now for that reason?
So I used to say that you get elected out in Israel because of the economy,
Yeah.
and that you get elected in based on security and your relations with the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say that right now our elections are going to be about security, but not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily in the way that people think. Okay. What our domestic security means, because it has a lot to do with personal security, the lack of law in Israel, meaning when you're in a war for 2 years and 9 months, and you have the type of government that you were describing before that has allowed so much lawlessness against specific segments of society, then you get a day like today when, tens of thousands of young men who are not drafted and don't work and paid Social Security and want to have a special status in Israel. It's like you get all these combos that are very important domestically inside Israel and nobody could care outside. I still
Mm-hmm.
think that Israel needs and wants a special relationship with the United States. Not only that, I think that we still need and want a special relationship with Europe in general. And Europe is being way harsher to us right now than the United States, governmental wise. I mean, people, it's bad everywhere. But I look at that right now and I go, okay, this is about us. I look at the mirror and I ask a lot of questions. I'm going to say to this audience here, because I'm very much one who's exceedingly critical of the government. And I think that October 7th was not specifically a failure of this government, the way that a lot of people do. I think it was all governments, okay, and all of the security. We were all looking at it. And you know why? Because we all wanted to believe that Hamas had changed. In its own way, it's naivete in the worst way. Aside from that, there are a lot of other failures that go on into there because there are always the voices who say, we knew when Hamas was going to do that. And the additional aspect that has to do with that special relationship with the United States is that at the end, because it's not our biggest economic partner. Okay, Israel certainly has, but it's not. It's both Europe.
Sure.
We have a lot also out towards Asia, but it's about shared values. And I'm going to not push back. I'm just going to put that mirror that I put in front of my face and I go, oh my God, who am I right now with the type of, ministers that I have inside the government and the things that they say. And I wake up in the morning and go, really? Um, and then I'm going to put the mirror in front of my face and I'm going to turn it back at all of you. And I'm going to say, what do you think you guys look like to the world? Do I really want to look like you? And these extreme voices that have come out in Israel, this is not something unique to Israel, Art. You have extreme voices inside the United States, and it's not unique to the United States. Look at what's happening in Canada. Oh my God, look what's happening in the UK. And then I go off to France. Democracies right now are being challenged in a lot of ways. And we're a democracy that's being challenged in very similar type ways between very conservative voices and very liberal voices. We have all of those voices here. And we don't border Mexico and Canada. We border Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and we have the unresolved conflict with the Palestinians, both in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and in the Gaza Strip, and I haven't even added in East Jerusalem. So, but that's not, again, that's part of it, but that's not the focus. People always look at our elections through the eyes of what does it mean about the Palestinian arena? And this isn't because we're ignoring it. I'm certainly not ignoring it, but that's not what the elections are about. The elections are about security. And when you look at the Palestinian arena through the eyes of security, you look at it in a different way than when you look at it through the eyes of 5 million people who do not have a country, who do not have passports, who do not have citizenship. It's looking at it through a different eye. And so I'm very challenged because for me, who is what I would call liberal or progressive, and those are like negative terms right now in the United States. I say liberal and progressive, I'm put into one camp, and I'm like, I'm this avid Jewish Zionist Israeli who's liberal and progressive. What, you can't be all of the above? And I'm being told in the, I'm like being told I can't be. I can either be this or that, and I'm military, and I'm security. So my complexity is not Miri. Lots of people hear what happens after a war like this. I shouldn't say that because I don't know what happens after a war like this because we're still in the war.
Right.
We're living through these challenges right now, and we have changed. And our changes are very much focused on what security means, because October 7th to us should never have happened, and yet it did. And now we have to live with that looking forward. Because October 7th, when you look at Hamas and Hezbollah and the Islamic regime of Iran, and that whole aspect, which is absolutely there, this was planned not as a 9/11 attack with 20 suicide bombers. No, no, no. This is something where we are now in June of 2026 is part of the October 7th attack. It's actually where they've succeeded the most in legitimizing themselves, in delegitimizing us, in dehumanizing us. We've become the monsters of the world.
Yeah. Let me turn it back to Iran for a second.
Sure.
Do you think there's a scenario? I'm sure Israel will be active in Iran the way it's covertly. Do you think there's a situation where Israel would attack Iran on its own, like overtly?
We've already attacked Iran on our own, overtly and covertly. They attacked us in April of 2024, and we responded. That one, by the way, was semi-covert. They attacked us in October of 2024, and we responded very overtly. We attacked in June of 2025, and the United States came for one night, but that was a 12-day campaign, which was 12 days of Israel doing it on its own. And one night, the United States came in with heavy-duty bombers on one site where really the U.S. capabilities are beyond ours. And so when you ask that to me, that straight answer is absolutely, but it would be very much depending on what you're going after. And here I would say that the only premise that I would see us doing so is a clear-cut preventing or preempting a threat, which is an existential one, which to me means a nuclear site, or a real full-scale attack. I don't know how much people follow here in that sense, with also what's happening with Hezbollah in Lebanon and the capabilities that the Islamic regime brought to Hezbollah and then built with Hezbollah there. But the challenge nowadays of the term of swarms of drones, if they fly 1,000 drones at once, the little ones, the big ones, okay, if they fly 1,000 at once, and that makes a really big impact. And I was just saying that because that's not the same as nuclear, but it can be very, very challenging. So yes, I absolutely think that we could and that we might. I think that right now we're in a very challenged place. 2026 is not looking great, just like 2025, 2024, and for that matter, 2023. So we're breathing in deep. And I want to say something happy, okay? Our economy is not tanked, which is quite amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite amazing, okay? I mean, most countries in the world, the United States at the end of World War I, World War II, you're on your own area. On 9/11 and on Pearl Harbor, you were attacked on your own ground. But aside from that, you're not usually attacked on your own ground, okay? And you have an enormous capability. We're a country that doesn't have a lot of industries in that sense. Most of our industries are high-tech types, but biotech and agri-tech, et cetera. And our economy is not tanked. And it's continuing to sustain, and it's continuing to invent and to do, and not just in the military arena, in the, again, the medical arena and the agricultural and the water. We do things, which is quite amazing considering everything that's going on.
Thank you. I think we're going to take a couple of questions from the Q&A. I remind everybody who's participating in this that if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A. So our first question is, what is the authority of the U.S. to give control to Iran of the international waterways of the Straits of Hormuz?
So thank you for the question. It's actually an international law question, okay? And at the end, the participants in the world of international law, that's one of the aspects where everybody is so challenged, not just by the Islamic regime of Iran, but by the term that we call rogue nations, meaning you're a member of the United Nations, you agree to the premise of the United Nations, and one of the aspects that all of the countries around the world have kind of agreed on is on international shipping routes. I want to give a different example to perhaps help people. All of the Bosphorus Canal, it's not a canal, it's a pathway, water pathway, is entirely in Turkish territory. It was before World War I, afterwards under the Ottoman Empire, and I say that because there have been wars to make sure that the ship traffic from the Black Sea can go through the Bosphorus to be able to get into the Mediterranean Sea and out to the world, meaning it goes only through Turkish territory, but it's an international shipping route. Okay? There's no question that the Hormuz Straits are international shipping routes. There are straits like this out in Asia and the Hormuz, there are all sorts. And the issue is that the Houthis, who are a non-state actor, have been closing a different international shipping route, the one which is in between Yemen and Somalia, or Yemen and Djibouti, that comes up and goes afterwards to the Suez Canal. And Iran decided that now it's theirs. And in the MOU, that's one of the things that's written into the MOU, and it's actually the last thing there. It says that in the next 60 days, Iran and Oman, who are on the two sides of the strait, will decide what will happen. And President Trump has said there will be no tariffs, and the Iranians have said, we're going to do whatever we want. But in international law, that's an international shipping route. But how do you implement it? Do any of you want to be fighting right now over the Hormuz Straits? You all just saw what that looks like, and it's not pretty. And to be able to implement it as an international shipping route is what we just went through. So that was a long explanation for a lovely question, because it's a real big question right now.
Thank you. Another question I got is, what's your opinion? This is not Iran. What is your opinion on the Haredi pushback on the draft? Is there a potential resolution to it?
There's a resolution to the Israeli-Iranian war, not just to the Haredis, okay? I mean, at the end, when we talk about resolutions, resolutions have the big C of compromise. And the question is always on both sides, who's willing to compromise? And then it's about negotiations. I'm going to give here something, and I don't mean in any way that the Haredis are like the Iranians, but I'm just going to say that conservative societies, people who are conservative, that they don't want changes. I mean, that's the kind of the definition of conservative as opposed to liberal or progressive who are all for changes, okay? It isn't about good and bad. It's different ways of approaching the world. The Haredi society inside Israel grew enormously over the last 78 years. They went from 0.5% in 1948, from 0.5 to 1, from 1 to 2, from 2 to 4. And when they were going from 4 to 8%, that's when the whole issue of the draft came up. Because even when they were 4%, it was a question mark, but it was like, why are they exempt from the draft and my kids are not, or myself? I mean, I was drafted, my husband was drafted, my kids were drafted. Why are they not? And in the last 25 years, all of the Israeli elections, all of the fact that governments fell and that the Knesset had early elections were over the lack of the capability to pass an agreed law on this issue of the draft. But it's not about the Haredis, it's about the draft. Because in addition to the Haredis, the Arab citizens of Israel are not drafted. And so it opens up a whole can of worms. Is this about the Jews or the non-Jews? There are Arabs in Israel who are drafted, the Druze community. But this whole issue has become one where the Haredis are very self-segregated in their communities. And they've always participated in the governments. When they're not in a government, you immediately see the difference. And they're in the government, and they always take very specific positions. Usually they want to be the health minister because we have universal health care, and they want to make sure with all of their many kids that you get all the benefits that you can. And I love the universal health care. It's great for everybody. But when you have a lot of kids, when you add in dental into the universal health care, that's a really big issue. And that was done by Haredi ministers. So will we arrive at a resolution? Like in politics, it's politics. There's a difference between the Haredi population and between the Haredi political leaders. And not all of them are one voice. When you talk to them as a group is one thing, and when you talk to them as individuals is something else. So you can meet all sorts inside Israel. Their numbers did not, when they went from 4 to 8%, the projection everybody was saying is that it's going to go from 8 to 16. And that has not happened. And part of that not happening is because some of the Haredis leave that very self-segregated community. And they stay religious, but they're modern Orthodox. They're not Haredi anymore. Okay, I'm just saying all of that because, yes, we will arrive at some kind of resolution. But right now, the voices have become very heated in Israel. It's very challenging. It's a very divisive issue. And it goes hand in hand with the politics because the government right now is passing laws which are very challenging for the bulk of the Israeli society that A, are drafted, B, work, C, pay taxes. And because of all of that, they're underwriting a portion of society that is not drafted, does not work, does not pay taxes. And if I can add in, we have education from age 3 through age 18 for free in Israel, like any, I would say, modern Western democracy. But there's a huge difference between the different governmental run system inside Israel and the Haredi, which is outside the system and still paid for by the government. So these are all issues that come up. The draft is at the tail end of it. I think that the elections and the new coalition government, it'll be one of the first issues that will be dealt with. And it will be done in dialogue. You don't have to impose it, but that dialogue needs to be done, I think, with the next generation of political leaders for the Haredi.
Here's another question from a member of the audience. At one point, Trump mentioned the need to defeat or disarm Hezbollah. Since launching his war for total victory and unconditional surrender of the Iranian Mullah regime, he barely mentions preventing them continuing to support and arm Hezbollah. Does he still care? What can Israel do if he doesn't still care?
It goes back to my own questions in that sense. To me, it's not necessarily about President Trump. We border Lebanon, and inside Lebanon, Lebanon has, it's Lebanese, Arabic, Shiites, Arabic-speaking citizens of Lebanon who are members of Hezbollah, but Hezbollah pledged allegiance to Iran over Lebanon. And I say that because on March 2nd, they made a choice of this year, 2026, when the Lebanese told them not to, when Israel told them not to, when the United States told them not to, Hezbollah joined the Islamic regime and started in an attack against Israel. And that's what's happening right now inside Lebanon, is in the aftermath of that Hezbollah firing at Israel and then firing all over northern Israel. So I'm not as worried as the way that this question was presented. I'm here inside Israel. I absolutely know right now we have Israeli soldiers who are there to protect not themselves. They're not there to protect themselves. They're there to protect the Israelis inside Israel from the Hezbollah attack. And that means that you want to both destroy the weapons that are near the border. You want to go into the places where they make the weapons themselves. We've been uncovering, oh my God, what we've been uncovering in southern Lebanon, 2 to 3 to 5 miles from the border, these enormous arsenals of weapons that were supposed to be used against Israel. And that includes also the drones, the FPVs, the smaller types, and the UAVs. So we're going to continue to do so. This isn't high intensity. We're not attacking in Beirut. We're not attacking in the Bekaa. And I say that those are different places inside Lebanon that are Hezbollah strongholds. And again, I don't know where it's going to go. We're still in it. The president has changed his tone several times, meaning if Hezbollah attacks us, and that's what we're trying to do right now, is every single time when they say Israel has attacked, we show that Hezbollah was attacking us and we were protecting. Nobody really likes the way that we present that. but that will continue. I want to say something about Hezbollah, Lebanon, that I think is really important that people may not realize. It's not a question of a double-edged sword. Our presence in Lebanon right now helps Hezbollah. And I say that very sadly. Why does it help Hezbollah? Because it gives them a cause. Nothing like a cause. Meaning, as long as we're sitting inside in a very perverse way, it gives them the cause to say, we're here, we're going against the Israelis who have invaded and are sitting inside Lebanon. And I said that because a lot of Israelis make a lot of statements that we're going to sit there and we're going to be there forever. And I'm like, no, we're not interested in conquering Lebanon. I'm old enough. I was a young officer in the first Lebanon War, 1982. And I've gone through, and in the second Lebanon War, I was the spokesperson to the international community. And I say that because I look at Lebanon and I'm very conversant with what's going on. And this isn't, to me, this is part of the choices that if we talked before about what we could or could not do, where everybody says, because the prime minister to me made a statement, if I'm prime minister, we're not leaving Lebanon. And I'm going, why make a statement like that? Do we want, what we want is for there not to be a Hezbollah. And we're in Lebanon to prevent Hezbollah. It's not about being in Lebanon. It's about preventing Hezbollah. And to me, it's an important aspect that I think that we fail at both explaining, but especially that if it isn't beneficial, then we don't have to sit inside there. Meaning if it doesn't protect the Israeli citizens, then there's no need to be inside Lebanon at all.
Thank you. Another question from the crowd. The number of U.S. congressional representatives opposed to selling arms to Israel continues to grow. What impact will this have on Israel?
I don't know. I say that very strongly. I mean, I think that there's a lot of, I don't think it has as much as an impact as people think, okay? I think that people have ridiculous ideas of what it actually means on the amount of foreign aid that the United States gives. And I want to remind all of you that all of the foreign aid, military aid that they give us is to buy things inside the United States that are supplied to us. It's mainly the airplanes. That's the big things and a lot of munitions. I do know that with the munitions, it is an issue. And I think that that's one of the statements that the prime minister made. We have domestic armament factories and capabilities inside Israel that make, I mean, for that matter, Iron Dome or Arrow, all the different interceptors, and we could make different munitions. Is that where I want us to go? It's where we are right now. If I said before that our economy amazingly is still sustainable, it isn't developing the way that we would want to. Every country needs to have its economy still grow. We're not exactly in a growth season. And inside Israel right now, I mean, at the end, go look at your own budgetary numbers, those who want to cut back. And I'm like, I'm all for not using not using your money for weapons, using your money to build schools and to build, high tech and to do wonderful things for the world. And right now inside Israel, 2024, 25, 26, and looking into 2027. I hate these things. These are part of my background as the chair of the Taub Center, which is looking at all these social policy issues. 30% of our budget is going to defense. It's unheard of. In the United States, it's like 4%, and you have a budget which is way more than us. 30% of our budget going, and so when you say about cutting, I go, wow, that would mean that even more of our budget would go to defense. And I want us to be building more schools and to be training teachers and to have higher education and the gaps in society. It's like you look at it in those terms. So yes, it would have an impact, but at the end, we're here and we will take what we can.
So we have about a minute and a half, and I think we should end on something positive, right? Although you've managed to spin a few questions positively, so I appreciate that. Do you see any positive developments or signs of hope at the moment when it comes to Israel's political and strategic position or strategic position?
Breathe in deep for a moment and try and take out of your mind the framing. And for a moment, I want to tell you that if you had told me 3 years ago that Syria would be a country that has no Iran in it, no Hezbollah in it, that Russia is is totally out there looking at the Western world, that if you would have a Lebanon, I border Lebanon and Syria, That right now I would have Lebanese and Israeli officers meeting inside the US and that they're talking carefully. Oh my God, that's a whole new Middle East. If you would have told me that there would be a war like the type of war that we had, and that we'd still have these sustainable relationships with UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco, with Egypt, with Jordan, nobody stopped that. When we look at that, that goes to show we're here for the long term. So there's so much talk that has to do with the Palestinian arena, and that's fine. Okay, I'm all for arriving at a resolution in the Palestinian arena. But I say that right now in that sense, it goes to show that we are here much more than what people understand. We're part of that Middle East, and we still see our strategic alliance as being with the United States of America, not with President Trump or President whoever it will be, but with the United States of America. And I think that what we need to find more is that common ground again that seems to have gotten to be so toxic. But I am very hopeful about Israel within the Middle East, and I still see that as something which is a very strong component and that it can grow. There's a lot of potential there, especially when we find out what actually happened inside Iran, because I think that Iran is much weaker than we think, but boy, are they good at rhetoric and at negotiation.
So I want to thank you so much, Miri. You've given us so much really interesting insight and nuanced look into a very complicated situation, after the MOU signing, but just in general with what's been going on. And we really appreciate that. Thank you to the audience for staying with us. Our hour is up, and we wish you a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.